This morning, I'm having a chat with Dr. Deborah Bullivant, the founding chief executive of Grimm Co, a Yorkshire-based literacy charity that is kickstarting kids' creativity in fun and quirky ways. Deborah, how are you?
Hello, I'm really good, thank you. How are you?
I'm very good. Thank you again for talking to me today. I mean, first of all, the big question here is, what is Grimm Co? Like, what does a child's experience look like when they kind of walk into your doors?
Oh wow, that's a big question. So Grimm Co is a literacy charity. You would never know that. We've created a space, and the space is the Emporium of Stories. And when you come through the door of the Emporium of Stories, you go into a magical space that really you can throw away all the chaos of your everyday life, leave it all behind, and get lost in your imagination. So it reignites your imagination. It starts to let you just be playful. It's an invitation to be playful. Because the reason we're here is we were created in 1148 by Graham Grimm just before lunchtime. And he created this as an apothecary to the magical originally. And he found out that magical beings, they need stories to survive. Um, that's what they thrive on. Like we need food and water and
Hmm. Hmm.
sunshine. Magical
Yeah.
beings need stories. So he created this back in 1148, and we've kept it going. He's still around, but not many of us have seen him, and you wouldn't want to. So he's around this whole story around Graham Grimm, his sister Griselda, and all the rest of the family that are absolutely fabulous beings of all different types. And we celebrate the magic of the folk tales and fairy tales and magical stories in all sorts of different ways. So there's secret doors everywhere. The secret doors take you through to our chapters and our writers' pads, where you can relax but enjoy the joyful discovery of stories in all of their senses. Now, this is a magical space. We take this space into communities, and the serious side to this is the narrative. Lots of children who we work with, and we work UK wide, but we specifically focus on Yorkshire. We're based in Rotherham, a town that has lots of challenges in itself, lots of areas of poverty and disadvantage. And lots of children have sort of lost their way in terms of their narrative, and especially in towns like this, have developed a more of a negative
Mm.
narrative, or there's a cyclical narrative going on within their families, that, like, they don't like education, or education's not for them, or there's lots of different things. We're about building a positive narrative for every child. So leaving no child behind. So we help children to find a narrative for themselves that is positive, using literacy approaches, using writing as a tool, using reading, using stories. And it's all about finding your place, making meaning of the world around you, and building your positive narrative and your own positive story. Because really, that's all we are, isn't it? You and me,
Mm.
we're just stories. That's what we leave
Yeah.
behind. It's who we are, it's how we thrive.
I love the idea that we're just a collection of stories at the end of the day. And this is based on, is it the 826 or is it the 826 Valencia model?
Yeah, it definitely inspired us. I mean, ours is based on a body of research, and the research told us what needed to happen. There was a project took place, and it was to see what would help children's literacies. And we were looking at it totally and really about the literacies, as in the tests that they take at primary school, and how we could change the children's literacy tests and assessments. And what I did was focus in on the most disadvantaged areas, the 10% most marginalised areas of the town. This whole body of research took place. The research had some phenomenal outcomes because it was all about creativity. And I was able to commission a hell of a lot of activities that were all very creative approaches. The research then informed a signature pedagogy, which is the way that you work with children and young people to develop something in particular, some learning process. And there was a great one came out of this, with some significant results that were unprecedented results in terms of
Mm.
children's literacies. So that's where I started to look at, right, okay, that research has happened. Now, how do we make this happen for the town? and started to work with communities to turn this into a model. And that's when I saw the TED Talk by Dave Eggers, who's now visited us. That TED Talk was amazing. And I saw this model that was perfect and aligned beautifully with us. So I made contact with them. So we're definitely inspired by that model, but we were already on a path to create this, which is really exciting that we could align. Now we're part of a bigger family, which is fantastic. The 826 family is an international family, which is great.
So you kind of saw this body of research, looked at it and felt, how can we implement this? It aligned with what you saw from Eggers' TED Talk, and you felt, and this was the birth of Grimm Co. Is that kind of, that's essentially. So why is this such an important thing? This focus on writing, creativity. Why is that such an important thing to be fostering in kids, do you think?
Writing's everywhere. Just behind you on your walls, writing's everywhere, everywhere. Look around me.
Yeah.
There's no way of escaping writing. It's the way we use coding to write, don't we? I mean, we developed coding so that we could communicate in different ways. It's a communication tool. If you don't have that communication tool, you're disadvantaged. If you don't do it well, you're disadvantaged. And if you can't make meaning of it in your way, then you're even more disadvantaged. So writing is everywhere, so we need to use it. And lots of children in schools are really switched off by writing. At the moment, the curriculum in the UK is very prescribed. It's a technical curriculum, especially in the terms of English and language, and it's very much about learning how to label parts of the curriculum. And schools struggle with getting the creativity out of the children when they're doing this technically based curriculum. So that's one reason why this is needed more than it's ever been needed, because it's okay if you've got children in a affluent area who have lots of experiences in their lives. They go to the theatre, they go all over the place in their home life, and they have all that to draw on, and they already engage in lots of creative stuff in their lives, and that's great. But there's lots of children who don't, for lots of reasons, but they don't. So if their only experience of development and learning and creativity is in schools, and they're now getting this technical based curriculum that's very technically taking the language to pieces and then reconstructing it with labels, so you know how to reconstruct it, but without the creativity that underpins all of that really important creative side that where your imagination's sparked, where you think differently to what you're given. We're limiting ourselves completely, and lots of children, young people are really switched off by that. If I said to you now, right, I want you to write a paragraph. You've got to fit in some fronted adverbials. I want to see at least 3. Make sure your punctuation and grammar is all correct. How inspired do you feel to sit and write a creative piece, a paragraph that's creative? And also, if you don't go many places, you don't see many things, maybe you go to a mall or a shops, but not much more than that. What do you draw on? You draw on things you've seen on the television already. So there's nothing unique. There's nothing coming out of your own mind. You're not being creative. So that's being really, we're dampening that down, and it's never been needed more than it's needed right now. So that's one reason, but there's so many. Another quick one is that stories are a way that we can engage. We all engage with stories in most of our minutes of every day. If you think about it, stories are everywhere. So using writing in a positive way, where you can just be free to write. Some of the greatest writers that I talk to, they talk about writing journals and observing their world, and that's what they draw on to write. If we did that more, imagine how much more equipped we are to deal with that world, let alone using it for writing for others and entertainment purposes, let alone ourselves. So there's many, it's multi-layered. Why this method?
How does Grimm Co. start to perhaps combat some of these problems around creativity, around, I guess, the richness, bringing in the richness of life into these kids' lives? How do you do that?
Oh, we've got a signature pedagogy that we've created on the basis of the whole piece of research that took place. And we keep building on that and developing our practice more and more. So we evaluate all the time. We read wider research all the time to see how we're reflecting on that. So there's a whole lot of work going on around what we do to make sure that we're current, that it's correct, it's appropriate, everything's right. But our signature pedagogy has things like giving child agency. A lot of the stuff as well that's going on within schools at the moment is that teachers are feeling under pressure for results. So often children are being led to a place rather than being enabled to find that place. So getting them to think for themselves and giving them ownership of something is really important. So when you're on a journey, you're given ownership of that. Yeah. So that's just one part of our pedagogy. There's always a product as well at the end of it. If you look at our website, you'll see on the showcase page, you'll see lots of examples of ways that we produce the work. It gives the children a reason to write. We find this with a lot of boys. They'll say, well, why am I doing this? What's the purpose of it? If they're wanting to write, if somebody's asking them to do some writing, like in a school, in a classroom, they don't choose to. They wouldn't choose to sit and write, a lot of boys. But when you give them a purpose, a reason to do it, there's a product coming at the end of this and it will be showcased and there'll be an audience for it. There's a real purpose. So we always turn it into an outcome. So we've got things like on our showcase page, there's a gala where Olivia Colman and Gary Oldman, both Oscar-winning actors, performed the poems that our children wrote and were part of this online gala that we created at the beginning of lockdown. They took it really seriously. They were so amazing. So yeah, that's an example, but we've done plays, we've done books, of course, many books. It's all about the young people deciding how it's going to go and what they're going to produce by the end of it. And we negotiate all that together and then we produce it beautifully. And then the big thing is engaging in watching an audience experience that writing that you produced from your head. Nobody else did that. And that is life-changing.
It was funny that watching Auger's TED Talk, and he spoke a bit about the diminishment of children's creativity and children's imagination and how that is something that is, it feels like a bit of a pandemic in the school system where, as you've kind of spoken about before, there's this idea that you're just a kid. I'm going to kind of push you down a bit. And it feels like you're doing the opposite here, really elevating kids and their ideas. And that's what I love about Grimm Co. and this model kind of, I guess, a bit more widely, is that it is respecting kids' ideas as something worth celebrating to begin with.
It's about encouraging this right across the board. Dave Eggers did talk about it, and it's absolutely right. And certainly in all of my experience and all of the research I've ever done, and I've got a background in education, it's worse now than I've ever known it in terms of how we're knocking creativity out of people. And it really, it's not rocket science. It's an easy thing to do to bring it back. But in the pressured environment of schools, it's definitely not something that teachers feel able to bring into their practice. So we're doing a lot with teachers as well to support the creative courage to bring this into their curriculum. We're doing a lot with families as well. So not just directly with children, but also the enablers who work around them to support them to be able to do more of this approach as well. I had a visit from China, a province in China, and they came over specifically to have a look at what we were doing. And this was soul destroying. They were saying, in the UK, you create the creators, you create the designers, you create the thinkers, because and it must be to do with your schooling. And for me inside, I'm thinking, this is soul destroying because we did, now no longer. But in China, they were looking outwards to see how to bring this in, to do more of it, because they were saying to me, we produce people that can do on the basis of instruction. You produce people who think new thoughts from the start. And how soul destroying to know that we're knocking that right out of the humans we are.
Oh, you speak a bit about, I guess, the educational kind of barriers that might be stopping creativity in the classroom. I guess another thing that might be stopping this expression is a bit more internal. You talk a bit about shyness on your website and how that is something you have to deal with. As a market researcher talking with kids, I often have to deal with shyness as well. So it's interesting kind of reading your thoughts, because it sounds like most times, if not all times, you manage to pull things out of these kids at the end and get them kind of engaging and they all look like they're having a great time. What do you do to connect with a kid who is perhaps a bit more shy, who's a bit less willing to share their creativity from the get-go?
It's complex. No one child has their shyness the same as another child. There's every child is individual. So you need to think of that the whole time, that every child is an individual. There are no one size fits all rules. And there's every reason behind that shyness will belong to that child's experiences and what's made that happen for that child. So for us, the joy of what we do, the belief in what we do is really key. So right at the start, when I was saying to you about how this was created in 1148, that story and Graham Grimm, we believe it. We are playful. We're in the game. We're in the story. So we're inviting to be playful. We're starting everything from a level playing field. Whatever you come with, it doesn't really matter. It's where you start from, and it starts from your imagination. So it's about kickstarting that. And so it's starting from that level playing field. It's also celebrating the funds of knowledge that you've created in your own life, whatever your experience is, whatever your community is around you, and whatever you're living with in your home. Those funds of knowledge that you've learned as a child to get you through your day are valuable and important. The funds of knowledge of what you've learned and your communication skills in whatever they are, and your coping strategies are really important. So we celebrate that and we encourage hearing about that. We want to know about some of those strategies that children have. An example is we do a story making workshop for schools. A class will arrive with their teachers and classroom assistants. They go through our secret door into our emporium, and they are told all about Graham and how he created this and what happens, and Griselda, his sister. They go into this room, and Graham, they hear from Graham. They don't know, they've never met Graham, but suddenly Graham or Griselda you'll hear them, and they'll be saying, "Who have you got there?" And just hear them above you. And whoever's facilitating on that day was, we've got a school from, and say which school it is. And they often say, it's disgusting, but they'll say, well, they can't make stories. I don't want them there. So then, of course, there's a provocation. The kids are like, yes, we can. Of course we can make stories. Well, I need 30 stories by lunchtime. Let's see if you can do that one. Well, then they've got the provocation. They're on it. The way that it's facilitated and the pedagogy is about listening to and encouraging and valuing every single contribution within that room. We've got mentors. Our volunteers are our lifeblood, and they are amongst the children, supporting them, embracing their thoughts and getting their thoughts out of them so that they can share to us. So the child doesn't immediately have to be the one putting their hand up, but the mentor will do it because they're doing it in small chats, and they're saying, this so-and-so here, Ben here, he said this, I think it's a great idea. They start to grow immediately. By the time they've done, they're putting their hands up, they're saying, I've got a really good idea. They're putting things forward. When theirs are chosen by the other kids as the character that they want to make the best story, you start to see this growth, and it goes on and on and on. By the end of it, we also know which children in that class have the greatest challenges. We know before they arrive because we've done lots of pre-stuff. Miraculously, their names get taken out of a hat to read the final gathered story at the end. And it's up to them if they're happy to read it, or they can bring someone along to help them. And I've seen other children give them a standing ovation. I've seen teachers in tears because they've never seen these children perform in this way. They've never seen them read aloud. They've refused to do it. We've seen lots of practice that is phenomenal happening, where children are doing for the first time things they've never done before. And by the end of this session, they write their ending in their book. It's being illustrated by an illustrator in front of them, so they can see it all coming to life. There's a reason to describe you beautifully, and then it's all done into a book. They get their book. They're the author of that book. Their own individual ending is in that book. It's published. It's bound. It's in their hands before they leave the building. And people think you can't change lives in a morning. Well, we do.
It sounds like you've created such a strong incubator of creativity in this one space. If you can go from not being willing to share thoughts at the beginning to being proud of a book they've written, by the end of a morning, that's incredibly powerful stuff. I mean, if you look back at the years you've been doing this and the lessons you've learned. I know one of your core tenets is learn from what we've done. Um, what do you think other brands who aren't perhaps in the same educational space, or perhaps they just kind of deal with kids tangentially, maybe it's product development, maybe it's experiences, what do you think they should be learning from you all at Grimm Co when it comes to engaging with kids and really sparking that creativity that you talk about so much?
Put yourself in their shoes. When we do teacher workshops, sometimes there's been times when we've got the teachers to do an exercise that they're asking their children to do. Would this be something you'd want to do? Would this be something that you would bring out the best creativity in you? That's number
Mhm.
one. Always value what the children bring, whatever it is. They've got something to contribute. Find it and celebrate it. Search for it, and search for children as individuals, not as just a group of children.
Mhm.
They're individual people who have all got the potential to be something spectacular, and one day could well be. You're part of that vehicle to get them there. Don't forget it for a second, and find what it is that they can celebrate. What is their thing? And then develop that with them and help them to see that. Unleash their imagination so that they can imagine a better narrative for themselves. Because a lot of children can't see beyond what they're given, and have lost already by the age of 7 the real ability to imagine something different from what they already know. So do that. Give them experiences to draw on. Somebody once said to me, because I interviewed a group of teachers and I said to them, what's the biggest barrier? And they said, children don't have experience to draw on anymore. They don't go anywhere. They don't do anything in these communities that we work in. And somebody had said to me, the Brontes didn't have experiences to draw on either, did they? But they drew on those experiences they got, and then they read. And by practicing that reading so well, they were able to practice their imaginations and take their imaginations off to all sorts of places. So reading, but the joy of reading, try and get that happening in some way, not a 5 minute at the end of a day, let's squeeze this in, but really celebrating reading as a tool to develop your imagination, for empathy, empathy for a character. Find a character that the children can find some empathy in. There's many, 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 many things I could tell you here, and we've got lots of these in our practice that we use in our development programs that we offer to adults. But there's many, many ways that you can do lots of this stuff.
So I like how this conversation started with the importance of kind of literacy and reading, and we've really brought it back kind of at the end, I think, to the importance of the written word and how it can unlock richness in young people's lives. The last question for me really is just learning a bit more about what's happening with Grimm Co. What's next for you all? I know you're moving, or you have moved location, is that right?
Yeah, we're right in the middle of moving. We've taken on a big old Gothic, beautiful church that was the hub of this community in Rotherham town centre for many years, but it needed a lot doing to it. Hell of a lot doing to it. It's a grade 2 listed building. It's really gorgeous heritage wise, but it's also got this background of being a community hub. But as a church, it had a dwindling congregation of 5. They were selling it, and there was a carpet company interested. I'm sure they'd have done a great job with it, but we wanted it to be a community place again. We found some funding from Arts Council England, and thankfully they gave us a grant that we applied for, and that allowed us to buy the building. So to cut it short, we've had many more pieces of funding from a variety of sources. We've had lots of support from our local authority, and we've got an amazing space now that we've also got Lumsden Design, who are the Harry Potter Studios designers. They're doing our fit out. So we're now on fit out. So we've moved in, we're in the back of house, and we're creating the feastery cafe that I was talking about earlier. The apothecary to the magical will be there, so you'll be able to come and buy your goods if you're a witch or a wizard or a troll. And we've got rooftop parking if you bring in your broomstick. And dragons, we have certain days when dragons are allowed in because they cause chaos with the fire breathing that they do. But yeah, everybody's welcome. Everybody is welcome, even if you are mortal. Humans can come too. And there's lots for everyone to do. There'll be lots of activities. In our previous place, it was much smaller. It didn't allow us to do as much as we need to do. So this will give us 4 times the space that gave us. It's much more beautiful. It's going to be stunning. It's a destination. Come and have something to eat and do an activity. Join in on the shop stuff. We're going to have all sorts of activities going on. It doubles up as a theatre. And behind the secret door, there's also a beanstalk that humans, I think, call a slide. So that's behind the secret doors. So that's where the charity work goes on. So all of the front of house stuff supports the charity work that goes on behind the secret doors.
Well, you had me at beanstalk slide, I think, but also I think dragons only and rooftop parking for your brooms. It sounds absolutely incredible. Deborah, thank you so much for talking to me today. It's been a real treat. It's been a lot of fun. So thank you very much.
No, thank you. Thanks, Sam.